Hi, welcome to Elite Literary Book Group. I'm Rachel Beck, and today what I want to do is just kind of briefly go over the courses I've done that are free to you on YouTube. And I've done Catcher in the Rye, The Great Gatsby, Jude the Obscure, and Their Eyes Are Watching God. And I've also done To Kill a Mockingbird. I do these mainly for AP students, so that's kind of how the courses are designed. However, if you just want to learn more about literature and, improve yourself, by educating yourself with great works of literature, knock yourself out. Because what I hate to hear, and I hear from students all the time, is that, yeah, we looked at that book or we read it, but we never really discussed it. And I think, well, then what's the point? I mean, really, what's the point of reading To Kill a Mockingbird if you're not going to talk about it and talk about the issues? And I know a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. So anyways, I do this kind of as a way of giving, an opportunity to learn, to read, and to read classics that, maybe some people think that the students they have can't understand it and can't read it, and I don't think that's true. So at any rate, but the way I'm going to explain the courses is by using a Q3 question. And I've looked for one that would, apply to all the books that I've done. Not every question is going to apply to every book that you've read, which is why you want to have at least 4 good pieces under your belt. Okay, so let's look at this question. It says, all kinds of books have been attacked, suppressed, or disapproved by authorities, groups, or individuals. Select an important work which you admire and which you propose to defend against possible objections. In a well-planned essay, present reasons why the work might be attacked, and base your defense on a consideration of such matters as its language, the people in it, its mood and spirit, and consequently its artistic purpose and value for readers. I would have loved to have this question. The main reason I think that books keep getting banned is because people, number one, don't read them, and number two, miss the forest for the trees. And if you look even at that last part, it's artistic purpose. A detail in a book is not the author's purpose. So, for instance, To Kill a Mockingbird, there's racist language in it. But it was a book that helped promote civil rights. It helped bring a character like Tom Robinson in terms of his humanity, to help people be more empathetic. So that's the artistic purpose, So at any rate, let me just go through the novels that I've done and act as if I'm defending. So the first one I want to talk about is the one I just did, Jude the Obscure. It's a Victorian novel, so there's not a whole lot that today would be, something people would object to. But in its time, it was considered Jude the Obscene, because for Victorian literature, it was obscene. And by that, I mean, it was burned by the bishop. The obscene part was the way that Hardy attacked religion, particularly Christianity. One reader burned it and sent Hardy back the ashes. Now, Hardy is a very facetious person. In a way, he was kind of asking for it. But if I were defending this and I was writing an essay about it, the first thing I would do, which I think is the most important thing about the book, is I would use his quote that he inscribes in the beginning of the book. And all he says is, "The letter killeth." That's a verse that comes from the Apostle Paul, St. Paul. But he leaves the second part of that quote out. The Apostle Paul says, "The letter killeth, but the Spirit lives." And what I would do is make an argument that what he's really criticizing in this book is legalism. That the whole, not just the characters, but the whole society is trapped in this kind of prison of a legalistic Old Testament view of God. God that's punishing. So that's what Paul meant by the letter. He meant the law. But the New Testament is the fulfillment. It's where you have the Spirit. And what makes this story so tragic is that there isn't a reconciliation. There isn't grace. So you see how you could still defend the novel, even if it attacks Christianity, because what it's attacking is the same thing the Apostle Paul attacked, right? So that just gives you, one example. What I try to do in my courses is give you a lot of background information, and you probably don't want to skip that part, because that's what's really going to help your essays. The more you know, the better you can make an argument, for whatever question they throw at you. The other one I was thinking about is The Great Gatsby. Let's just say that somebody could maybe make a case that the book is anti-American because it criticizes the American dream. Now that sounds ridiculous, but possible that it could happen. So if I were doing this, I was writing this essay, the thing that I would really want to point out, and this goes back to having background knowledge of Fitzgerald, is one of the things that he famously says is that the test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas at the same time and still be able to function. So if you think about what that's saying, it's not a black and white issue. Like, okay, I lean more towards this political spectrum, so therefore I guess I'm against this now, and then I'm against this. I was also a debate coach and also an AP teacher, but one of the exercises that I think that really helped debate students was that they would have to make an argument, and it could be a very conservative argument, but then they would have to turn around and argue the opponent's side. So what you personally think, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the skill of making an argument. And that's what you want to do for the AP test, because if you don't make an argument, you're going to end up saying something very obvious in your thesis, and then the only way to support the obvious is to support it by summary. And you don't want to summarize, you want to analyze. So first of all, we would have to look at what exactly is he saying about the American dream? And what is it about Gatsby that's problematic? Well, one thing about Gatsby that's problematic is that he doesn't earn the American dream in a way of hard work. The idea that if you work hard enough and you do everything right, that you're going to be okay. You may or may not be okay. But Gatsby's not a real good example because he's corrupt. He lies and cheats. He's kind of a part of this shady mob of his business deals are not really legit. So you have that aspect of it. But what you notice about Fitzgerald's prose, when he is criticizing like the people at the party, and it's all very over the top, right? It's excessive. And at the same time, he's criticizing it, he also makes it tantalizing. You know, at the same time, and that's also the way we see Gatsby. We know we can't really trust what Gatsby's saying, but we want to believe him. And this really comes out like when you get to the part about the who was driving the car. Was it Daisy or was it Gatsby? And people naturally assume it was Daisy because she's a woman, and as one of my students pointed out one time, women are bad drivers. Okay, you're actually not that far off because that's the assumption. Why don't we want to believe it could be Gatsby, though? He's been lying the whole time. You know, and Tom says, you know, that he says to Nick later, Gatsby threw dust in your eyes. And I suggest that Gatsby throws dust in our eyes too, because there's part of us that really wants to believe in the American dream. That's not anti-American. If you look at the last passage, he says, and as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him. Somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. So here you hear a little bit of it, you know, it's unrealistic. You know, he didn't know that this dream was going to end the way that it did. But see how the other opposing idea comes up. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year after by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we'll run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. To me, I mean, that's hope. Yes, the dream seems impossible, but still, this is who we are. This is, you know, this is in our nature to go for it, to believe in it. So, you know, that's how I would address The Great Gatsby. You know, and you also want to kind of show the whole meaning of the work in these essays. Okay? So showing those two opposing ideas would be very important. Their Eyes Are Watching God. This was a book written by Zora Neale Hurston. And at the time, you know, she's a black writer, and there's not very many black female writers. And she ends up writing a classic, but nobody really knows that until later on. The book gets criticized because of her use of what's called black vernacular, the dialect. And let me just read this criticism from Richard Wright. So we're focusing also, you know, mainly on the language that she uses. Richard Wright said the novel had no theme, no message, no thought. He also stated that the characters portrayed an image for the benefit of white readers. Hurston's characters eat and laugh and cry and work and kill. They swing like a pendulum eternally in that safe and narrow orbit in which America likes to see the Negro live, between laughter and tears. The first thing I think about when I read that last part of the criticism, between laughter and tears, anybody who wants to be a writer and is writing characters would probably want their characters to be between laughter and tears, because that's drama. right? This is also important to see Hurston as an anthropologist. She was a folklorist. Her characters come from basically her cultural studies, and she doesn't apologize for it. Okay, and I'll give you an example of the way that the language, sounds. This is where Nanny says to the protagonist, Janie, I wanted you to look upon yourself. I don't want your feathers always crumbled by folks throwing up things in your face. And I can't die easy thinking maybe the men folks, white or black, is making a spit cup out of you. Have some sympathy for me. Put me down easy, Janie. I'm a cracked plate. Now, if you notice, just in that one, dialogue right there, there's about 3 or 4 metaphors. This is poetic. I don't want people to make a spit cup out of you. There's a lot of imagery. Your feathers. And what's important about the way that she talks and makes these images is because Janie does sort of resemble someone who wants to take flight. Now, for her time, that is a very novel idea. Okay, her grandmother was a slave. And her grandmother's point of view is you get married and you have someone take care of you, if you're lucky. Janie wants to reach self-actualization, which that in itself is a theme. What redeems Janie is being able to have her own voice. So it's interesting that Richard Wright says that the novel has no theme, especially since the students who are even reluctant to read this book at first are very likely to write about it on the AP test. Why? Because it goes with so many different universal themes. It works because of it being thematic. And another thing, what you want to defend is the artistic sensibility. Richard Wright and his contemporaries, they wanted to be competitive with literature. They also wanted the literature to make a political statement because that's what they felt like it needed. And, they were not wrong. They're right. But Hurston, for one thing, didn't grow up the way Richard Wright did in the South, in Mississippi, with Jim Crow laws, because she grew up in an all-black community in Florida. Her experience, those impressions that you get in childhood are very different. What she is interested in is the relationships between husband and wife. She's interested in gender issues, which Richard Wright is not even considering. He's dismissing women's rights altogether. Today, he wouldn't make that statement, but, he was a man of his time, too. So, we could forgive him for that. But look at what she is doing in terms of her own voice and her own creation. She doesn't want to be like everybody else. And she doesn't really have anybody to emulate anyways. She's making it her own. And that's really what the modern movement was about. This is also about the Harlem Renaissance. And, it would be like telling someone who's studying jazz, don't fool around with that. You want people to take you seriously, you need to study classical music. And if you play jazz, you know that it's just as difficult. So, and it's more artistic. Once Tyler Perry actually brought up Hurston because he kind of ran into the same problem. People accused him of stereotyping his characters. But the way he looked at it as, he said, this is therapy. We don't have to take ourselves seriously all the time. And besides that, you want to give people freedom to express themselves and to be who they are. And so that the theme of freedom in the novel, self-actualization, kind of actually goes together with the idea of telling somebody, since you can write, you should be writing this way. You should be doing it this way because you're not helping our cause. It's just, you can do art for art's sake. Not everybody's going to be a George Orwell. All right, so Catch on the Rye. Okay. This one gets criticized a lot. And what I do in the introduction is go into this in more depth if you want to hear it. But, basically people write this book off because of its language, because there's some references to sex, which he doesn't actually have, because I would argue that he's afraid of sex. I think he wants to keep his virginity. Now, you can just see the righteous parent, as soon as they see, this word or whatever, my son's not going to read that. I wanted my son to read it because I knew what the book was really about. And the book is about maintaining your innocence. I mean, think about what he wants to do. He wants to catch children before they fall off the cliff of that phony adult world, before they become too materialistic, before they have to sell their soul, at a job or something like that. It's really about innocence. And, he's going through a crisis. This is really usually overlooked. But, in the beginning, you learn that his little brother has died. And, when you lose someone at that age, death is really close. You think about your own mortality. So I would even go a step further and argue that he's afraid of growing up because he also is afraid of death. There's a wonderful scene where he's in the cab and he's worried about where the ducks go. What happens to the ducks? I mean, what happens when it freezes over? What do they do in this? This captor's like, it's in their nature. They'll be okay. It's taken care of, and it's kind of saying, you're gonna be okay. Things will, nature will take care of you. It's not all that bad, to live. And he really feels that lifeline through his little sister, because she's so innocent. So there you have it. Something that is assumed that's a bad book. He uses bad language, and yet it's really about innocence. Kind of like Wordsworth said about, the child is the father of man. So at any rate, I will put the link below. If you're interested in watching the courses, please take advantage of them. And all I ask is that you subscribe and maybe leave me a comment every now and then. I'd really appreciate it. I hope this helps you. All right, thanks.